It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
We'd outperformed massively in the bottom quartile, the affordability end, with first home buyers and investors running rampant in Perth. And we suggested last year that we would see that demand start to shift up through the market. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. So the growth rate on the bottom quartile is now almost exactly the same as the middle 50%.
And that is Matthew Hughes in Perth on the Real Estate Breakfast this morning, Australia's largest property podcast, as we continue to talk about the property market because, we've said this before, just like you, we are addicts about the real estate market. And welcome to any new listener who is joining for the very first time, wherever in the world you might be listening to us from. We are streaming right now on iHeartRadio, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Don't forget, you can leave a voice message these days, and the link is below in the show notes. Well, it's a Monday, the 13th day of October. Hope it was a fruitful, tasty and enjoyable one for anybody over the weekend who found their dream property. Or maybe it was just a starter unit. You can say what you like about a starter home. The first home has got so many memories attached to it because you got out of the renting cycle and the start of your property journey began. Like, I remember so well my first home, a 3-bedroom home on 1,012 square metres, chopped off the back section, sold that, which was, at the time, was half the purchase price of the property. And then I kept that property for 10 years, added another level to it, and that kind of set me up. But let's take you right now to Matthew Hughes. Now, Matthew is a guy we haven't spoken to for a while, and he is in Perth. Matt, I am sure that you can remember that first property of yours as well.
Absolutely I can, because it's a bit of a stain on my record. It's actually a cautionary tale that I talk to clients about because I did the right thing. I bought a 3-bedroom villa similar to yourself when I was 19 years old. Back then it was only $95,000 and I think my mortgage was about $700 a month. But my story started similar to yours but ended differently because I wasn't smart enough to hang on to it. I sold it. I made a good profit, but it was definitely one of the biggest and the first mistakes that I made in the property game. So it's something that I talk to clients about quite a bit.
Yeah, so if you are buying a house, 3-bedroom house on a plot of land, there it is. Buy, hold it as long as you can, and then look to sell it, I think is the way to go. Now, I've got to congratulate you here because you've been named a finalist in the REWA Buyer's Agent of the Year Award. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, look, and also I wanted to say thank you to you because I haven't been on the podcast for a while, but I do still listen. And I think you gave me a little congratulations a little while ago when I won the Pippa Property Investment Advisor of the Year Award. And now we've just been named as a finalist for the REWA Buyers Agents of the Year Award, which is happening, I believe, in about a month's time. So fingers crossed we can pick that one up too, but it's a pretty good group of finalists. So we'll see how we go against the best in WA.
Matt, you're on fire. Well done. Keep that going. So let's turn our attention to Nicola Powell, who we spoke to last week. She was telling us all about the national affordability picture, the new first home buyer scheme. I mean, this is such a really big talking point. And she shared surprise at Perth's rental market, particularly the recent plateau and slight decline in rental prices. No doubt you picked up on that.
Yeah, we monitor these things closely and obviously always looking for trends. But I think you may recall from our conversations either late last year or early this year, I actually predicted this would happen this year. And so it wasn't much of a surprise to us. I think the domain statistic that Nicola mentioned was a 0.5% vacancy rate in Perth. I don't actually believe it's still that low. Each of these different companies have different methodologies. I know that the REWA or the REIWA statistic is a bit higher than that. And what we're seeing on the ground is that whilst it is still a pretty tight rental market, it's not that same sort of FOMO level of demand, and we don't have that same level of upward pressure on prices. And my prediction that I made previously was probably more to do with hitting an affordability ceiling at some point. So that's what I think we're seeing at the moment. I don't see the same thing on the sales value side, but certainly on the rental side, I think we're at or close to a peak there.
Yeah, Nicola Powell also highlighted the potential impact of the first home buyers scheme on prices across the country. Really interested in how you see all of this playing out in the Perth property market as a new wave of buyers, of course, are going to enter the market.
Yeah, look, Perth could be, as it has been over the last few years, more heavily impacted by this because one of the stats that I wrote an article a few weeks ago talking about this, where the long-term average for first home buyer lending is actually quite very, very much below where it's been over the last 10 years in Perth. Other cities are not the same. And what it suggests to me is that you've got this backlog of buyers that have just been waiting for this scheme to start. And so we're starting to see the impact of that on the ground. It won't reflect in statistics for a while, obviously, with the lag. We are basically injecting a flood of new buyers into a market that already has way too many buyers and historically low stock levels still. And so this is going to put upward pressure on prices. It is going to make things very, very competitive again. It's already starting to feel like the peak of the FOMO times from a year plus ago in Perth. And so it's making it very difficult to find and secure good assets in Perth at the moment. I guess the upside, though, is whilst there will be more upward pressure on pricing, Perth is still one of the most affordable capital cities, much more affordable than Sydney. Obviously, I think the average wage that you need to earn there to buy the average property is nearly $300,000. In Perth, it's still down around $174,000. And Perth also has some of the highest incomes and the best wage growth in the country. So an affordability ceiling on the sales value side is not something that I can see us hitting anytime soon.
Yes, and if you have a look at those new price caps right across the country, and Perth in particular, that has gone up to $850,000. I mean, it's a big save time. You know, where you were saving for 20%, it was taking you 6 years. Now, with the 5% deposit, 1 year, 7 months, you're saving 4.5 years. I mean, that is massive. That is on a dual disposable income of $127,000. So yes, they will be out and they will be buying.
Yeah, absolutely. We're creating buyers from thin air, essentially. These are buyers that previously couldn't afford to buy in a market where, as I said, there's already way too many buyers. So it is going to make things very difficult again over here for either first home buyers, also investors who are still relatively active in the Perth market. And it's going to keep that upward pressure on pricing, I think, for probably at least a couple of years here.
Matthew Hughes is with us on our Monday morning from Perth. When we come back, I'll get him to drill into the stock levels a little more, and we'll also be having a look at what he thinks the potential growth is likely to be in the next year or two in Perth. We'll do that after this.
Stay ahead of the competition with the latest news, insights and data analysis on the property podcast that keeps you informed. The Real Estate Podcast. We are just as addicted to property as you are.
It is a Real Estate Monday. Matthew Hughes from Perth is with us, talking all things Perth property market. And yes, those wretched stock levels. You touched on this before the break, Matthew, and the ongoing struggle to keep up with the demand driven by strong population growth across major capitals, of course, like Perth. Pretty dire still, isn't it?
Dire might not even be the most extreme word we could use to describe it. We've gone from, so for reference, a balanced market here is maybe about 15,000 properties on the market. When the market sort of tapered a little bit late last year and things sort of slowed down to a degree, it was still very much a seller's market, but that FOMO level of demand had sort of dissipated to a degree. And stock levels had climbed from historic lows of around 3,000 or 3,200 up to about 5,200. It did sort of expand the market and the scope for buyers a little bit, and then it started trending in the opposite direction again. So now we're at a new historical low. I think we're down at around 2,800 properties available on the market. Only about 1,700 of those are houses. And given how few suburbs that we have on our approved list for investors especially, it does make it very slim pickings for anyone who's looking to get into the market. In terms of the cause of it, obviously population growth nationally and in WA, where it's still leading the country, That's a big part of the excess demand. But an often overlooked factor in this is that there's less people living in each dwelling nowadays. So that statistic has dropped quite considerably, and that's actually exacerbating this problem. Even if we were to return to the previous figure of how many occupants were in each dwelling, it could possibly solve most of this housing crisis. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening. There's no trends in the data to suggest that we're going to go back in that direction. So we are in a situation where unless we create more housing, build more housing, we're not going to get back to anything that resembles balance. And again, there's nothing to suggest that that's going to happen either, because construction rates over here have started escalating again at pretty concerning rates, and time frames are blowing out again. And so construction appetite is starting to drop off again, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're talking about with FOMO, because come November, we might get another rate drop. And together with what is happening with the 5% deposit, you can see that there's a perfect storm coming where that FOMO is just going to exacerbate. Right, let's look ahead right now and your outlook for the Perth property market and what you're willing to put a figure on potential growth over the next year or two. How does that shape up?
I'll start by saying I think I was probably a little bit too bearish on the Perth market maybe 3 to 6 months ago in terms of whether we were going to continue to keep putting in investors into Perth as opposed to the other cities that we operate in. But I've become a lot more bullish on it recently, seeing what I'm seeing coming down the pipeline. I do think that, look, I don't typically put numbers on these things. There's some pretty intelligent economists out there that do, and they often get it wrong. But for you today, Craig, I am going to put a number on it. I think that the Perth market specifically in 2026 is going to be into the double digits in terms of growth. I'm predicting 12 to 15%, and I'm pretty comfortable with that band. And then I think pushing into 2027, you could be around that sort of 7 to 10% mark. So there'll still be upward pressure on growth on prices for some time, but albeit at a moderating rate as we do eventually get closer to some sort of affordability ceiling. What we're also seeing within that, though, is that we're seeing, as I predicted talking to you last year, is that we'd outperformed massively in the bottom quartile, the affordability end, with first home buyers and investors running rampant in Perth. And we suggested last year that we would see that demand start to shift up through the market. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. So the growth rate on the bottom quartile is now almost exactly the same as the middle 50%, whereas previously there was quite a stark difference between the two. So we are seeing a moderating growth level at the lower end of the affordability end, and the middle is activating as upgraders start tapping into equity that they've created through their homes, and they now have more serviceability and more confidence through rate cuts. And so that's really starting to take place now, and central areas in Perth are really the outperformers now. So anything close to the CBD in that sort of $1 to $2 million range or slightly above, that's where we're seeing very low stock levels, very high levels of competition, and predicting very good growth over the next couple of years.
Good stuff, Matthew. It is all happening in Perth. You've got your finger on the pulse. Thank you for all of that, and good luck too with the REWA Buyers Agent of the Year Award. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Thanks very much, Craig, and I hope you're feeling better soon.
It's your weekday real estate breakfast with news, interviews and predictions every morning on the Real Estate Podcast.
Up here in Gympie, you can buy 1,000 square metres quite reasonably priced, and it goes up from there. You can have 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres. With that bypass as well, that brought in a lot of employment at that stage too.
When you're looking at saving for 5%, it only takes 2 years and 10 months. So you're saving almost 7 years in terms of time it takes to save that all-important deposit.
So Dubai Hills, it's divided into 30 sub-communities, and when it's fully completed by, they say, mid next year, there's going to be approximately 2,000 villas and thousands of apartments.
We need to demonstrate you are able to service that loan and make those repayments, but you will have a higher loan amount. And with some providers, that higher loan amount may also come with a higher interest rate, so you'll be paying more interest over the life of the loan.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.